Chapter 1. The night she felt rain came down in sheets, turning the cobblestones of Ashford's old quarter into rivers of black glass. Elena pressed her daughter closer to her chest, feeling the child's shallow breathing against her ribs. Lily's fever had broken 2 hours ago, but the damage was done. The medicine had cost everything Elena had left. And the men who'd fronted her the money weren't known for their patience. She'd known they would come. She just hadn't expected them so soon. Please, she whispered into the rain, her voice lost beneath the thunder. Please, just a little more time. The alley opened into a narrow courtyard, hemmed in by centuries-old stone buildings that leaned toward each other like gossiping crones. Elena's apartment was 3 floors up, the window dark. She'd sold the last candles yesterday. Her legs trembled as she climbed the exterior stairs, each step a negotiation with a body that had eaten nothing but broth and stale bread for a week. She almost made it to the landing. The hand that grabbed her collar came from behind, wrenching her backward with such force that Lily flew from her arms. Elena screamed, watching her daughter tumble, but small hands caught the railing, and Lily clung there, eyes wide with terror. Thought you could hide from us, sweetheart? The voice was rough, whiskey-soaked. Marcus, the enforcer who smiled when he worked. Elena twisted in his grip, her vision swimming. My daughter, please. She's just a child. Should have thought of that before you borrowed from Mr. Hale. His fist connected with her ribs, and the world tilted. She tasted copper, through the ringing in her ears. She heard Lily crying. Elena clawed at Marcus's arm, her nails drawing blood, but he only laughed. He dragged her toward the courtyard's center, where the ancient fountain stood dry and crumbling. The other 2 men emerged from the shadows. She recognized their silhouettes. Had served them drinks at the tavern before she'd been fired for taking too many shifts off to care for Lily. The boss says you owe him 400 crowns, Marcus said, shoving her against the fountain's edge. You got 400 crowns hiding in that dress? I can work, Elena gasped. I'll work double shifts. You'll what? You got fired, Elena. You're worthless. He leaned closer, his breath hot against her face. But Mr. Hale, he's a reasonable man. He said we could work out an arrangement. The way his eyes traveled down her body made her stomach turn. No, the word came out stronger than she felt. I won't. Marcus's smile vanished. Wrong answer. The first blow knocked her to the ground. The second made her vision go white. She curled around herself, trying to protect her face, her ribs, anything vital. Through the pain, she heard Lily screaming from the stairs, and the sound split her heart more cleanly than any fist could. I'm sorry, she thought, tasting blood and rain. I'm so sorry, baby. She didn't see the shadow that fell across the courtyard, didn't hear the footsteps that made no sound on wet stone, but Marcus stopped mid-kick. The air changed. It grew colder, heavier, as if the night itself had drawn breath. Elena forced her eyes open, blinking through the blood that ran down her forehead. A man stood at the courtyard's entrance. No, not a man. Something wearing a man's shape. He was tall, impossibly so, dressed in black that seemed to drink the light. His face was all sharp angles and pale skin that had never seen sun, framed by dark hair that fell past his collar. But it was his eyes that froze the breath in Elena's lungs, silver, bright as mercury, and utterly inhuman. Gentlemen, he said, and his voice was like silk sliding over a blade. I believe the lady said no. Marcus recovered first, puffing out his chest. This ain't your business, friend. Move along. The stranger tilted his head, and something ancient and terrible flickered behind those silver eyes. I am not your friend, and you have made it my business by spilling blood in my city. Your city? One of the other men laughed nervously. Mate, you lost? This is Ashford, and he never finished the sentence. The stranger moved like liquid shadow, crossing 20 feet in the space between heartbeats. Elena saw his hand close around the man's throat, saw him lift the full-grown enforcer off the ground with one arm as easily as Elena might lift Lily. The man's laughter turned to choking. Gasps. Ashford has been mine for 300 years, the stranger said softly. Every stone, every shadow, every drop of rain that falls on these streets answers to me. And you, he turned those burning eyes on Marcus, have broken my oldest law. You have hunted the helpless in my domain. Marcus pulled a knife, his hand shaking. What the hell are you? The stranger smiled, and Elena saw his teeth, saw what no human smile should ever reveal. I am Dorian Ashford, he said, first of the House of Night, lord of this city and keeper of its peace. And you have committed violence under my sky. He released the man he held, letting him crumple to the ground, then looked at Marcus with something like disappointment. "Run." Marcus ran. His companions followed, their footsteps echoing off stone as they fled into the maze of alleys. The stranger Dorian watched them go with the patience of something that had all the time in the world. Then slowly, he turned to Elena. She should have been terrified. Every instinct screamed at her to crawl away, to grab Lily and run. But her body wouldn't obey. She could only stare up at this impossible creature, with his silver eyes and inhuman grace. "You're bleeding," he observed, crouching beside her. Up close, she could see he cast no shadow, that his chest didn't rise and fall with breath. Extensively. "My daughter," Elena managed. "Please, she's on the stairs." He glanced toward where Lily huddled, then back at Elena. Something flickered across his perfect face, curiosity, perhaps, or recognition. "She's unharmed. You, however, are dying." Elena knew it was true. She could feel her life leaking out through a dozen wounds, could taste death in every shallow breath. "Then let me see her. One last time. Please." Dorian studied her for a long moment, his head tilted like a predator considering prey. Then he did something unexpected. He lifted her, cradling her broken body against his chest as if she weighed nothing. His skin was cold as marble, but his hold was gentle. "What are you doing?" Elena whispered. "Saving your life," he said simply. "Whether you want me to or not." Chapter 2. The threshold. Elena woke to shadows and silence. Not the silence of sleep, but something deeper, the kind that pressed against her eardrums and made her aware of her own heartbeat. She lay on something soft, wrapped in fabric that smelled of lavender and age. Her body ached, but distantly, as if the pain belonged to someone else. Memory crashed back. The courtyard, Marcus, the rain, the creature with silver eyes. Elena's eyes flew open. She found herself staring at a ceiling painted with constellations she didn't recognize, rendered in gold leaf that caught the light of candles burning in iron sconces. The room around her was vast and gothic, all dark wood panels, burgundy velvet, and furniture that looked older than the city itself. "You're awake." The voice came from the shadows near the window. "Earlier than I expected. Your wounds were severe." Elena pushed herself upright, her hands tangling in sheets of silk. She looked down and found herself dressed in a nightgown that wasn't hers, soft as water against her skin. Her body was wrapped in clean bandages, and when she probed her ribs experimentally, they protested but didn't scream. "Where's Lily?" Her voice came out rough, desperate. "My daughter, where is she?" Dorian Ashford stepped into the candlelight, and Elena's breath caught despite herself. He looked different without the rain and darkness, no less dangerous, but somehow more real. His face was beautiful in the way marble statues were beautiful, perfect, cold, and completely inhuman. "The child is asleep in the room adjacent," he said, gesturing to a door. Elena hadn't noticed. "She's been fed, bathed, and assured repeatedly that her mother is alive. She has significant concerns about monsters, which I found ironic." Elena's eyes darted to the door, every maternal instinct screaming at her to run to Lily, to verify with her own hands that her daughter was safe and whole. "She doesn't know what I am," Dorian added, reading her fear with unsettling accuracy. "I told her I was a doctor. Children believe what they wish to believe, but you're not a doctor." Elena's hands clutched the sheets, anchoring herself. "You're." The word stuck in her throat, too impossible to voice. "Vampire?" Dorian supplied, utterly calm. "Yes, firstborn of the House of Night. Turned in the year of our Lord 1724, blood bound to this city by laws older than your grandmother's grandmother. Would you like more details? Or shall we begin with why I brought you here instead of letting you die in that courtyard?" Elena stared at him, her mind struggling to reconcile fairy tales with the creature standing before her. He looked no older than 30, but something ancient lurked behind those silver eyes. Centuries of patience, of watching, of knowing things no mortal should know. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I'm aware." Dorian moved closer, and Elena noticed he made no sound when he walked, as if his feet didn't quite touch the floor. "You're in shock. Understandable. Your world has become significantly more complicated in the span of 4 hours." He settled into a chair near her bed, not close enough to threaten, but near enough to speak without raising his voice. The consideration in the gesture surprised her. "Where am I?" Elena asked. "My home. Ashford Manor, built in 1746, seat of the House of Night for 3 centuries." He gestured vaguely at the room. "Specifically, you're in the East Wing guest quarters. Your daughter is in the nursery next door. The exits are locked, but not against you, against those who might wish to finish what they started tonight, Marcus and his men, and their employer, this Mr. Hale you mentioned. I've sent word that you and the child are under my protection now. They won't trouble you again." Elena's hands trembled against the silk sheets. Why would you help me? You don't know me. I'm nothing, I'm just you threw yourself in front of 3 armed men to protect your child," Dorian interrupted, his silver eyes fixed on hers with uncomfortable intensity. "You fought when you should have begged. You asked to see her one last time before you died. That is not nothing, Elena." The sound of her name in his mouth sent a strange shiver through her. "How do you know my name?" "Your daughter said it approximately 47 times while I was cleaning your wounds. She was quite insistent that I save you. I found her persuasive." Something almost like amusement flickered across his face. "She threatened to pray for my soul if you died." "I don't have a soul anymore," but the sentiment was noted. Despite everything, the impossibility, the fear, the strangeness of waking in a vampire's home, Elena felt her lips twitch. That sounded exactly like Lily. "I need to see her," she said firmly. Dorian studied her for a long moment, then rose. "You'll need assistance walking. Your leg was badly broken." "I've said it, but mortal bodies heal slowly." He offered his hand. Elena looked at it, pale, elegant, belonging to something that should have been dead for 300 years, and hesitated. "I don't bite," Dorian said dryly. Not without permission. The casual mention of biting should have terrified her. Instead, Elena found herself taking his hand, letting him pull her carefully to her feet. His skin was cool and smooth, like touching fine porcelain. He steadied her when she swayed, his grip gentle but unyielding. Slowly, he instructed, guiding her toward the nursery door. "Your body has been through considerable trauma." Elena leaned on him more than she wanted to admit, each step a negotiation between will and weakness. But when Dorian pushed open the nursery door and she saw Lily sleeping peacefully in a small bed, surrounded by more luxury than Elena could have provided in 10 lifetimes, the tears came without permission. Her daughter was clean, dressed in a nightgown of soft cotton, her fever-flushed cheeks now pale and cool. She clutched a stuffed rabbit Elena had never seen before. She refused to sleep without something to hold. Dorian said quietly, "I had it brought from the storage rooms. It belonged to someone long ago." Elena sank into the chair beside Lily's bed, her hand finding her daughter's small, warm fingers. "Thank you," she whispered, the words inadequate for the magnitude of what this stranger, this creature had done. "Don't thank me yet," Dorian replied, his voice carrying a weight she couldn't quite interpret. "You're safe tonight. Tomorrow, we discuss the cost of my protection." Elena looked up sharply. "What cost?" But Dorian was already moving toward the door, a shadow peeling away from shadows. "Rest, Elena. We'll speak when you're stronger. You'll need your strength for what comes next." He paused at the threshold, silver eyes gleaming in the candlelight. "The men who hurt you tonight serve a mortal crime lord, but they've attracted the attention of something far worse, a rival house that doesn't share my restrictions about hunting humans. War is coming to Ashford, and you, unfortunately, are now standing directly in its path." The door closed with a soft click, leaving Elena alone with her sleeping daughter and the terrible knowledge that being saved might have been only the beginning of her nightmare. Chapter 3. The rules of night. Lena didn't sleep. She sat beside Lily's bed through the remaining hours of darkness, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall, reassuring herself that this impossible sanctuary was real. When dawn light finally crept through the heavy curtains, thin and gray, filtered through layers of velvet, Lily stirred. "Mama?" Her voice was small and certain. "I'm here, sweetheart." Elena gathered her daughter into her arms, ignoring the protest of her healing ribs. Lily burrowed against her, and for a moment, the world was simple again. "The nice doctor said you'd be okay," Lily whispered. "He promised." Elena stroked her daughter's hair, her mind churning with questions she couldn't ask a 6-year-old. Did he hurt you? Scare you?" "No," Lily pulled back, her eyes solemn. "He was sad though. I could tell. He has sad eyes, like you get when you think I'm not looking." The observation struck Elena silent. She'd expected fear from her daughter, or wonder at the grand house, but not this quiet perceptiveness. A knock at the door interrupted them. Elena tensed, but it was a woman who entered, elderly, human by the warmth in her weathered face, carrying a tray laden with bread, jam, and steaming tea. "Good morning," the woman said briskly. "I'm Mrs. Bellamy, the housekeeper. The master said you'd be awake. Thought you might be hungry." She set the tray on a small table, then turned to Lily with a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "And you must be the brave little girl who threatened to pray for Lord Ashford's soul. He's still talking about it." Lily giggled despite herself, and Elena felt something in her chest unclench slightly. "Where is Lord Ashford?" Elena asked carefully. "Sleeping, dear. He keeps nocturnal hours, as you might imagine, Mrs. Bellamy said it so matter-of-factly that Elena blinked. "He'll rise around sunset. In the meantime, he's left instructions for your comfort. Eat first, then I'll show you to the bathing room. You've proper clothes waiting, nothing fancy, just practical things in your size." "How does he know my size?" The question escaped before Elena could stop it. Mrs. Bellamy's smile turned knowing. "Lord Ashford notices everything, dear. It's what's kept him alive, well, undead for 3 centuries. Now eat before it gets cold." She left them alone, and Elena found herself ravenous. She and Lily devoured the bread and jam, the first real meal either had eaten in days. The tea was strong and sweet, fortifying. Afterward, Mrs. Bellamy returned and led them through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly, all dark wood, and portraits of pale-faced people, with eyes that followed their progress. The manor was a labyrinth of Gothic elegance, every surface carved or painted, every corner hiding some new wonder or shadow. "How long have you worked here?" Elena asked, as they climbed a spiral staircase. 42 years, Mrs. Bellamy replied. "Started as a scullery maid, worked my way up. Lord Ashford pays fair wages, and asks only that we keep his secrets and maintain the house. It's a better life than most. Get in, Ashford. You know what he is, of course. Hard to miss when your employer doesn't age, never eats, and sleeps in a locked room all day." She glanced back at Elena, her expression gentle. "He's not what you're imagining, dear. He follows the old laws, the ones that kept vampires and humans coexisting before greed corrupted both sides. He feeds only from the willing, pays them generously for their blood, and hasn't killed a human in over a century. The House of Night has protected this city from worse things than you can imagine." Elena wanted to ask what could possibly be worse than vampires, but they'd reached the bathing room, a vast chamber with a porcelain tub large enough to swim in and walls lined with mirrors that reflected endless versions of her battered face. Mrs. Bellamy helped her bathe, gentle with her wounds, while Lily splashed in a smaller tub nearby. Clean clothes waited as promised, a simple dress of deep blue wool, undergarments, stockings. Everything fit perfectly, which should have been comforting, but instead felt unsettling. He notices everything. When they were dressed and Lily occupied with toys in the nursery, Mrs. Bellamy led Elena to a library that stole her breath. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, thousands of them, their spines cracked with age and use. A fire crackled in a massive hearth, and near it sat a writing desk covered in papers. "Lord Ashford thought you might wish to read," Mrs. Bellamy said. "Or simply rest somewhere other than the nursery. Ring if you need anything." She indicated a bell pull near the door. Alone, Elena moved through the library like a ghost, trailing her fingers along book spines. Philosophy, history, poetry, and languages she didn't recognize. On the desk, she found maps of Ashford, old ones, showing the city as it had been centuries ago, and newer ones marked with symbols she couldn't decipher. She was studying a map dated 1803 when she noticed the portrait above the fireplace. It showed a young man, beautiful, dark-haired, dressed in the fashion of a century past. But it was his eyes that made her step closer. Silver eyes that seemed to see through paint and canvas, through time itself. Dorian, when he'd been mortal, or newly turned. The artist had captured something hungry and lost in that gaze, something that made Elena's chest ache with unexpected sympathy. "I was 28, a voice said from the shadows near the door. When that was painted, still adjusting to what I'd become." Elena spun, her heart hammering. Dorian stood in the doorway, dressed in dark trousers and a white shirt open at the collar. He looked less forbidding in daylight, or would have, if not for the complete absence of color in his skin and the eerie stillness of his posture. "I thought you slept during the day." Elena managed. "I do, usually." He moved into the room with that unsettling grace. "But I wanted to speak with you before nightfall, before the dangers I mentioned become more immediate." Elena's hand found the back of a chair, steadying herself. "The rival house you mentioned, House Corvus. They're old, powerful, and they don't follow the accords that govern the rest of us." Dorian's expression darkened. "They've been encroaching on my territory for months, turning humans without consent, feeding without restraint. Last night's attack on you drew their attention. They'll see you as leverage against me. Why would they care about me? I'm nobody. You're someone I chose to save, Dorian said simply. That makes you valuable. It makes you a target. Elena's mind raced, fear warring with the surreal nature of the conversation. What do you want from me? Dorian was quiet for a long moment, those silver eyes searching her face. I want you to stay here, where I can protect you and your daughter. In exchange, I need information about Mr. Hale and his operation. House Corvus has been using mortal criminals as proxies, expanding their influence through human crime. If I can cut off their mortal allies, I weaken them. You want me to betray Hale. I want you to help me save lives, Dorian corrected. Hale's operation has already resulted in 7 deaths this month, people who couldn't pay their debts. How many more before House Corvus decides to turn his entire organization into their personal hunting ground? Elena thought of the other women at the tavern, the families struggling in Ashford's slums. Thought of Lily, and what kind of world she'd inherit if monsters mortal and immortal went unchecked. If I help you, she said slowly, what happens to us after? When this war you're talking about is over? Dorian's expression shifted, something almost like respect flickering in his eyes. You'll be free to leave, with enough money to start somewhere new. Or you can stay in Ashford under my continued protection. The choice will be yours. And if I refuse to help you now, then I'll still protect you, because I don't break my word once given. But more people will die while I fight this war blind. He stepped closer, and Elena forced herself not to retreat. I'm not asking you to trust me, Elena. I'm asking you to trust that I'm the lesser evil in a city full of monsters. Elena looked up at the portrait, at the lost young man Dorian had been, then back at the ancient creature he'd become. Tell me, she said quietly, what you need to know. Dorian's smile was small, almost sad. Everything. Starting with how you came to Mr. Hale for 100 crowns. Chapter 4. Threads of blood and truth. They sat across from each other at the library's reading table as afternoon light filtered through the heavy curtains. Dorian had poured her tea, an oddly domestic gesture from a creature who didn't drink, and settled into his chair with the infinite patience of something that had all the time in the world. Elena wrapped her hands around the cup, using its warmth to steady herself. Lily got sick 3 months ago, she began, her voice low. Fever that wouldn't break. The physician said it was her lungs, that she'd need expensive medicine or she wouldn't survive the winter. Dorian listened without interruption, his silver eyes fixed on her face with uncomfortable intensity. I worked 2 jobs, but it wasn't enough. The apothecary wanted payment up front. I went to the bank, but women don't get loans without a husband's signature. Bitterness crept into her tone. My husband died 2 years ago. Dock accident. They never found his body. I'm sorry, Dorian said quietly, and something in his voice suggested he understood loss in ways she couldn't fathom. Elena nodded, swallowing past the tightness in her throat. Someone at the tavern mentioned Mr. Hale, said he helped people in difficult situations. I should have known better, but I was desperate. He gave me the money for 100 crowns with 2 weeks to pay it back. The interest was, she shook her head, impossible. I knew I couldn't make it, but Lily was dying. So you borrowed from a loan shark to save your daughter's life, Dorian said. That's not stupidity. That's love. The simplicity of his understanding caught her off guard. She'd expected judgment, or at least questions about her choices. Instead, he simply accepted her desperation as fact. Hale operates out of the Copper Rose, Elena continued, a gambling house in the warehouse district. He's got a network enforcers like Marcus, girls who work the tables, dock workers who move his contraband. Everyone knows he's untouchable. The city guard looks the other way, because House Corvus protects him, Dorian said, his tone darkening. They've been consolidating power through mortal proxies for the better part of a year. Hale's operation gives them access to desperate people they can use, manipulate, or turn. Elena set down her tea, her hands trembling slightly. What does it mean to turn someone? Dorian was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. To make them vampire. It requires draining a human to the point of death, then feeding them vampire blood. Most don't survive the transformation. Those who do lose their humanity slowly, their capacity for empathy, their connection to mortal concerns. House Corvus turns people indiscriminately, without consent, creating fledglings with no training and no moral compass. And you don't? I follow the old laws, Dorian said. Turning requires consent given 3 times, once when mortal, once at the edge of death, and once after drinking vampire blood. The process must be witnessed by another vampire of good standing, and the sire is responsible for their fledgling for a century, teaching them control, feeding, ethics, the rules that keep us hidden from mortal eyes. He leaned forward slightly, candlelight casting shadows across his inhuman features. I haven't turned anyone in 60 years, Elena. The responsibility is too great, and immortality is more curse than gift. Most who seek it have no idea what they're asking for. Elena studied him, seeing past the beauty to the weariness underneath. You're lonely. Dorian blinked, clearly startled. What? Lily said you had sad eyes. She was right. Elena spoke carefully, testing the observation. You've been alive for 300 years. How many people have you watched die? How many friends, lovers, humans you cared about? For a long moment, Dorian simply stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression, a crack in the carefully maintained facade. All of them, he said quietly. I've buried all of them. That's what immortality means, Elena. You become a ghost in your own life, watching the world change while you remain frozen. Every connection you make is temporary. Every person you care about is already dying from the moment you meet them. The rawness in his voice made Elena's chest ache. Then why protect this city? Why bother with humans at all if we're just fleeting? Because you matter, Dorian said, and there was something fierce in his tone now. Your brief, brilliant lives matter. The fact that you die makes every choice you make more precious, not less. You loved your daughter enough to sacrifice everything. You fought armed men with nothing but your body and will. That's not nothing, Elena. That's everything. The intensity of his gaze held her pinned, and Elena felt something shift between them, a recognition of wounds that mirrored each other across the gulf between mortal and immortal. Tell me about House Corvus, she said, needing to break the moment before it consumed her. Dorian settled back, the mask of control sliding into place again. They're led by Lord Nathaniel Corvus, turned during the Roman Empire. Old enough to remember when vampires ruled openly, when humans were cattle. He despises the modern accords, the laws that require consent for feeding, that forbid killing humans, that keep our existence hidden. He wants to return to the old ways, and he's building an army in Ashford, using Hale's criminals as cover. The murders, the disappearances, they're feeding experiments. Corvus is testing how much he can take before I'm forced to act openly. Dorian's fingers drummed against the table, the first nervous gesture Elena had seen from him. If I move against him directly, it triggers a blood trial, formal vampire law that requires neutral arbiters from other houses. It would expose our existence to more human eyes, potentially violate the accords myself. So you're trapped, Elena said slowly, understanding dawning. You can't act without breaking your own laws, but if you don't act, innocent people die, precisely. Which is why I need to dismantle his mortal operation first. Cut off his access to victims, expose his proxies, force him to act openly where I can challenge him within the law. Dorian met her eyes. That's where you come in. You know Hale's operation. You know who works for him, where he keeps his records. When he moves his money, you want me to spy on him. I want you to help me save the people he's selling to Corvus piece by piece. Dorian's voice softened. I won't force you, Elena. You've sacrificed enough. But if you're willing, I'll do it. The words came out firm, certain. Elena thought of the other desperate mothers, the dock workers drowning in debt, the girls at the tavern who'd shown her kindness. But I have conditions. Dorian raised an eyebrow, and something almost like amusement flickered in his expression. Name them. You protect Lily. Whatever happens to me, you keep her safe. You ensure she has a future education, money, a chance at a real life. Done. And you teach me. Elena leaned forward, her jaw set. If I'm walking into danger, I want to know what I'm facing. Teach me about vampires, about your world, about how to protect myself and recognize threats. Don't keep me ignorant. Dorian studied her for a long moment, something like respect warming his silver eyes. You're not what I expected, Elena Thorne. What did you expect? Someone who'd accept safety and ask no questions. Someone content to hide while I handled the monsters. He stood, offering his hand. Instead, I find someone who demands to walk into the darkness armed with knowledge. Very well. I'll teach you everything you need to survive my world. Elena took his hand, feeling the cool strength of his grip. When do we start? Tonight, Dorian said. When the sun sets and the real Ashford awakens. I'll show you what hunts in the shadows and how to hunt them back. Chapter 5. Lessons in Darkness. Sun died slowly over Ashford, bleeding crimson across the rooftops before surrendering to night. Elena watched from the library window as shadows pooled in the streets below, transforming the familiar city into something strange and predatory. Behind her, she heard Dorian enter, felt him really. A change in the air pressure that made her skin prickle with awareness. You can sense me now, he observed, moving to stand beside her. Good, that instinct will keep you alive. Elena glanced at him. In the twilight, he looked more solid somehow, less like a beautiful statue and more like something vital and dangerous. His silver eyes gleamed with an inner light that had nothing to do with reflected candles. Does the night make you stronger? She asked. Yes and no. The sun doesn't destroy us, that's mortal fiction, but it weakens us, makes us sluggish. Night is when we're fully ourselves. He gestured toward the city. It's also when they hunt. Are you ready? Elena thought of Lily, safely asleep in the nursery with Mrs. Bellamy watching over her. Thought of the choice she'd made to step into this world with open eyes. I'm ready. Dorian led her through the manor's corridors to a room she hadn't seen before, a study lined with weapons that gleamed dully in lamplight. Swords, daggers, crossbows, things she couldn't name. He selected a small knife with a silver blade and handed it to her. Silver doesn't kill us, he said, answering her unspoken question. That's also fiction. But it burns vampire flesh, slows our healing. If you need to defend yourself, aim for the eyes or throat. It won't stop us, but it will buy you seconds to run. Elena weighed the knife in her hand, its balance surprisingly good. What does kill you? Decapitation, fire, prolonged starvation. A wooden stake through the heart won't kill us, but it paralyzes us until it's removed. Dorian's tone was matter-of-fact, clinical. We're difficult to destroy, but not impossible. Just much harder to kill than humans. He moved to a map spread across a table. Ashford, marked with colored pins. Red pins are confirmed Corvus sightings. Blue are Hale's known operations. Yellow are disappearances in the last month. Elena studied the pattern, her throat tightening. The yellow pins clustered around the blue ones. He's taking people from Hale's debtors. Exactly. Desperate people. No one will miss. Perfect victims. Dorian's jaw tightened. Tonight, I'm going to show you how to recognize a vampire. How to tell fledgling from ancient, fed from starving, controlled from feral. By taking me into the city, Elena said slowly. Into danger. Into my world, Dorian corrected. I won't let harm come to you, but you need to see what you're truly facing. Talking about vampires in a library is different from encountering one in a dark alley. Elena's fingers tightened on the knife. Then let's go. They left through a servant's entrance, emerging into streets transformed by darkness. Dorian moved differently here, fluid and alert, his senses clearly tracking things Elena couldn't perceive. He'd given her a dark cloak that swallowed her frame, making her nearly invisible. Stay close, he murmured. Don't speak unless necessary. Watch everything. They moved through Ashford's old quarter like ghosts. Dorian, navigating alleys and shortcuts with the ease of someone who'd walked these stones for centuries. Elena's heart hammered, but she forced herself to observe, to learn. There, Dorian whispered, stopping in the shadows near a tavern. The woman in the red dress. Watch her. Elena peered around the corner. A beautiful woman stood near the tavern entrance, her pale skin luminous in the gaslight. She smiled at a drunk man stumbling out, her teeth very white. Fledgling, Dorian murmured. Maybe 5 years turned. See how she's too still. Young vampires haven't learned to mimic human movement yet. And she's watching his pulse point. She's hungry but poorly controlled. As they watched, the woman touched the drunk man's arm, her lips moving. He laughed, swaying, then followed her willingly into a side street. Should we? Elena started, but Dorian shook his head. Watch. They followed at a distance. In the alley, the woman pinned the man against a wall, her mouth at his throat, but she pulled back after only moments, studying him carefully. The man blinked, dazed but unharmed, as she pressed coins into his hand. Consent and compensation, Dorian said quietly. She's following the laws. He agreed to feed her, and she's paying him for his blood. That's the difference between us and Corvus. They moved on, and Dorian showed her more. A vampire barkeeper whose eyes glowed faintly in the dark. 2 ancient ones playing chess in a park, so perfectly still they looked like statues. A group of fledglings causing trouble outside a theater. Dorian dispersed them with a single look. their immediate submission telling Elena everything about his power. "How many vampires are in Ashford?" she asked, as they walked. "Under my protection?" 43. "I know everyone by name, by lineage, by the laws they follow or break." His voice carried centuries of responsibility. "Corvus has brought at least 20 more in the last 6 months. Fledglings, mostly. Reckless and hungry, they turned into the warehouse district, and Elena recognized the approach to the Copper Rose. Her steps faltered. "We're not going in," Dorian assured her. "Just observing." They climbed to a rooftop across the street, Dorian lifting Elena effortlessly to the height. From there, they watched the gambling house's entrance. Men came and went, dock workers, merchants, a few wealthy patrons. But some of the figures moving in the shadows around the building moved wrong, too fast and too fluid. 4 vampires, Dorian said, his voice tight. "Corvus's people. They're not even hiding anymore." As they watched, Marcus emerged from the building with another enforcer. They dragged a struggling woman between them, young, terrified, protesting a debt. The vampires in the shadows watched with predatory interest. Elena's hand found Dorian's arm. "We have to help her. If I intervene directly, Corvus can claim I attacked his people unprovoked. It triggers the blood trial." Frustration edged his words. "This is why I need Hale's operation exposed. Once the mortal authorities arrest him, Corvus loses his hunting ground. How long will that take? How many more people will he take while we gather evidence?" Dorian looked at her, silver eyes blazing. "That's the impossible choice, Elena. Justice through proper channels, or vengeance that might damn us both." Below, the vampires moved closer to Marcus and his captive. One of them, tall, with golden eyes that caught the lamplight, smiled. Elena made a decision. Before Dorian could stop her, she cupped her hands around her mouth and screamed, "Fire! Fire in the warehouse!" The street erupted in chaos. People poured from the Copper Rose. Marcus and his partner dropped the woman in their surprise. The vampires melted into shadows, unwilling to be seen. The woman ran. Dorian stared at Elena, something between exasperation and admiration on his face. "That was reckless. That was necessary," Elena countered, her heart pounding. "You said every life matters. I won't watch people die while we play politics with monsters." For a long moment, Dorian simply looked at her. Then, slowly, he smiled, a real smile that transformed his face, made him look almost human. "You're going to be trouble," he said. "Good," Elena replied. "You could use some." A sound from below made them both freeze. The golden-eyed vampire stood in the street, looking directly up at their rooftop. He couldn't possibly see them in the darkness, but his gaze found Dorian unerringly. "Lord Ashford," he called, his voice carrying easily. "Lord Corvus sends his regards. He suggests you keep better control of your pets." Dorian's hand found Elena's shoulder, pulling her behind him. "Tell Corvus that I know exactly what he's doing, and that every law he breaks brings him closer to destruction." The golden-eyed vampire laughed. "We'll see, old one. The world is changing. Your precious laws won't protect you much longer." He vanished into shadow. Leaving them alone on the rooftop, Dorian's hand trembled slightly on Elena's shoulder, the first sign of real fear she'd seen from him. "We need to leave, now. They know you're with me." As they fled across the rooftops toward the manor, Elena realized the war Dorian had warned her about wasn't coming. It had already begun. Chapter 6. Blood oaths. An ancient lost thief burst through the manor's doors as midnight bells tolled across Ashford. Dorian's grip on Elena's wrist was iron, pulling her through corridors until they reached the library. Only then did he release her, pacing before the fireplace like a caged predator. "That was incredibly foolish," he said, his voice tight with an emotion Elena couldn't quite name. "Corvus's lieutenant saw you, heard you. Now they know I'm using a human informant. I saved that woman's life," Elena shot back, her own fear transforming into defiance. "Wasn't that the point? To protect people? The point was to keep you alive." Dorian spun to face her, and his eyes blazed silver bright with something raw and ancient. "Do you understand what you've done? You've painted a target on yourself. Corvus will see you as leverage, a weakness he can exploit. Then maybe you shouldn't have saved me in the first place," Elena said quietly. The words hung between them like a blade. Dorian stared at her, his chest rising and falling with breaths he didn't need, an unconscious mimicry of human distress. Then his shoulders sagged, and he sank into a chair. "You're right," he said, his voice hollow. "I should have left you in that courtyard. Let nature take its course. I've done it before, watched humans die because intervention would complicate things. He looked up at her, and Elena saw something broken in his gaze. But I couldn't, not with you. Elena moved closer, drawn by the naked vulnerability in his admission. Why? Because you reminded me of someone. The words came reluctantly. The way you fought for your daughter. The way you asked to see her one last time. My sister, my mortal sister, she died protecting her child from plague. I was already turned, already watching from the shadows. I couldn't save her. The old laws forbid turning the dying without consent, and she was unconscious, unable to give it. His hands clenched on the chair arms. I held her hand while she died, watched the light leave her eyes, promised her I'd protect her daughter. What happened to the child? Elena whispered. I kept my promise. Watched over her from a distance, ensured she had opportunities, protected her from dangers she never knew existed. Dorian's smile was bitter. Then I watched her grow old and die. Then her children. Then theirs. I've watched 7 generations of my sister's bloodline live and die. Elena. And every single one of them looked at me on the rare occasions we met and saw a stranger. Elena sank into the chair opposite him, her anger dissolving into comprehension. That's your curse. Not immortality itself, but loving mortals while being unable to truly be part of their lives. Yes, the admission seemed to cost him. So when I saw you in that courtyard, fighting for your daughter's future the way my sister fought for hers, I couldn't walk away. Even knowing it would complicate everything. Even knowing I'd probably doom us both. The firelight cast shadows across his inhuman features. And Elena found herself seeing past the monster to the man underneath, lonely, burdened. Carrying centuries of grief he could never set down. I'm not sorry I screamed, she said softly. That woman deserved to live. But I am sorry for putting you in an impossible position. Dorian studied her for a long moment, then rose and moved to a cabinet. He withdrew a crystal decanter filled with dark liquid that definitely wasn't wine. What do you know about blood oaths? The change in subject startled her. Nothing. Should I? If you're going to be part of this war, you need to understand the laws that govern us. He poured the liquid into a glass. The scent of copper filled the air, and Elena realized with a jolt what she was seeing. Vampire society is built on blood oaths, binding promises enforced by our very nature. When a vampire gives a blood oath, breaking it causes physical agony. Prolonged violation can drive us mad, even destroy us. He set the glass down without drinking. I'm blood sworn to protect this city. That oath is why I can't leave, why I can't ignore Corvus's violations, why I can't simply kill him and be done with it. My sire bound me to Ashford 300 years ago as penance for my early excesses. This city is my prison and my purpose. Elena absorbed this, understanding clicking into place. And Corvus, what binds him? Nothing. He's old enough that his sire is long destroyed. He has no master, no oath, only his own desires. Dorian's expression darkened. But there's one law even he can't break: the conclave accords. After the vampire wars of the 1600s, the surviving houses agreed to rules. No mass turning, no open feeding, no exposing our existence to human authorities. Breaking these triggers a blood trial, where all houses judge the offender. But you said Corvus wants to return to the old ways. Why would he care about the accords? Because the other houses would unite to destroy him if he violated them openly. He's powerful, but not powerful enough to fight all vampire kind. Dorian began to pace again. That's why he's working through proxies, using Hale's criminal network to hunt, claiming any deaths are mortal crimes, building his strength in the shadows until he's ready to challenge the accords themselves. Elena stood, her mind racing. Then we expose him, prove he's violating the accords, force the other houses to act. That requires evidence. Other houses will accept. Vampire witnesses, proof of unauthorized turnings, bodies that show clear signs of vampire predation. Dorian stopped, looking at her with something like hope. Which means we need to catch him in the act, or find where he's keeping his new fledglings. The copper rose, Elena said immediately. If he's using Hale's operation as cover, there must be a connection. Hidden rooms, perhaps. Somewhere he can turn people without witnesses. Searching Hale's gambling house would be dangerous, reckless. Exactly what you'd tell me not to do. Elena met his eyes steadily. But I know that building. I worked there before the tavern. I know the layout, the guards' patterns, where Hale keeps his private records. Dorian shook his head. Absolutely not. If Corvus's people are watching the building, then we need a distraction. Something to draw them away while I search. Elena's jaw set with determination. You said I was trouble. Let me prove it. Elena, you can't do this alone, Dorian. You've been fighting alone for 3 centuries, watching people die while you follow laws that your enemies ignore. Let me help you. Let someone stand with you for once. The words struck something deep in him. Elena saw it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his silver eyes widened slightly. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Dorian crossed the distance between them into strides and took her hands in his. His skin was cool, but his grip was steady, real. If we do this, if I allow you to take this risk, I need you to understand something. His voice was low, intense. I will protect you with everything I am. Every power I possess, every law I can bend without breaking, every ounce of strength in this immortal body. You will not die for my city, Elena. I won't allow it. Elena's breath caught at the fierce protectiveness in his tone, at the way he held her hands like she was something precious. Why does it matter so much? I'm just another mortal. Just another brief life in your endless existence. Because you're not, Dorian said simply. Because in 3 centuries, I've never met anyone who looked at a vampire and demanded he teach her how to fight his battles. Because you saved a stranger tonight with nothing but your voice and your courage. Because when I look at you, I don't see death approaching. I see someone who makes immortality feel less like a curse. The admission hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to name. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, and she knew with certainty that she was crossing a threshold from which there was no return. Then teach me, she whispered. Teach me how to stand in your world without breaking. Dorian's thumb traced across her knuckles, a gesture so tender it made her ache. We start tomorrow. Tonight you rest. Because what comes next will require all your strength, and more courage than any mortal should need. He released her hands slowly, reluctantly, then stepped back. Sleep well, Elena Thorne. The war begins in earnest tomorrow. Chapter 7. The Seagalene awoke to screaming. She bolted upright in the pre-dawn darkness, her heart hammering. The sound came from somewhere below Mrs. Bellamy's voice, sharp with terror. Elena grabbed the silver knife Dorian had given her and ran barefoot into the corridor. Lily. She burst into the nursery to find her daughter awake, but safe, clutching the stuffed rabbit. Mrs. Bellamy stood at the window, her face pale. They're here, the housekeeper whispered. God help us, they're here. Elena joined her at the window and felt her blood turn to ice. The manor grounds were surrounded. Figures moved in the pre-dawn gloom, too many to count, all with the unnatural stillness of vampires. At their center stood the golden-eyed vampire from the Copper Rose, and beside him, a tall figure in black that radiated ancient power. Lord Corvus, where's Dorian? Elena demanded. He's still in his day chamber, Mrs. Bellamy said, her voice shaking. He can't wake until sunset. Not without a crash from below cut her off. The sound of splintering wood, of locks breaking. They were coming inside. Elena's mind raced. Sunset was still 2 hours away. Dorian was helpless, unconscious in whatever sealed room he slept in. The manor's other vampires, if there were any, would be similarly trapped by daylight. They were on their own. Take Lily to Dorian's chambers, Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. Lock yourselves in. Don't open the door for anyone but me or Dorian. Miss Elena, you can't face them alone. I'm not alone. Elena thought of the weapons room, the silver blades. I'm angry. Now go. Mrs. Bellamy grabbed Lily and fled down a side corridor. Elena ran the opposite direction, toward the study where Dorian had shown her the weapons. Behind her, she heard footsteps on the stairs, not running, but walking with the confidence of predators who knew their prey was trapped. She reached the study and grabbed a crossbow from the wall, her hands clumsy as she loaded it with a silver-tipped bolt. She'd never fired one before, but desperation made quick students of anyone. The door crashed open. The golden-eyed vampire stood in the doorway, smiling. The mortal pet, he purred. Lord Corvus wondered if you'd run or fight. I bet him you'd fight. Thank you for making me richer. Elena raised the crossbow, her arms trembling. Get out. Or what? You'll shoot me? He laughed, stepping inside. Silver hurts, little mortal, but it doesn't stop us. And even if you hit me, which you won't, there are 20 more behind me. Then I'll shoot 20 times. Elena pulled the trigger. The bolt took him in the shoulder. He staggered back with a hiss, smoke rising from the wound. Silver-burned vampire flesh. Dorian had told her true. It wouldn't kill, but it hurt. She grabbed another bolt, her hands shaking as she reloaded. 2 more vampires appeared in the doorway, flanking the golden-eyed one. They didn't look amused. Bring her. The golden-eyed vampire snarled, clutching his shoulder. Lord Corvus wants her alive. Mostly. They came at her fast. Elena fired again, missed, dropped the crossbow and pulled the silver knife as they closed in. The first vampire grabbed her wrist, his grip like stone. Elena twisted, remembering street fights from her youth, and drove the knife toward his throat. He released her with a scream as silver bit into his flesh. She didn't wait, she ran, fleeing deeper into the manor's maze of corridors. Behind her, footsteps followed, patient and relentless. Elena's mind raced. She needed help, needed something to even the odds. The manor was huge, full of rooms she'd never explored. Somewhere in this gothic labyrinth, there had to be. She skidded around a corner and nearly collided with a door she'd never noticed before. It was reinforced steel, marked with symbols that hurt to look at directly. A small window of thick glass was set at eye level, the day chamber. Dorian's sleeping quarters. Elena pressed her face to the glass and saw him inside, lying on a simple bed, completely still. Too still. Death still. Whatever animated vampires abandoned them during daylight, leaving them vulnerable, helpless. Dorian, she whispered, knowing he couldn't hear. I need you. A hand grabbed her hair, yanking her backward. She cried out, slashing with the knife, but the vampire twisted it from her grip effortlessly. He slammed her against the corridor wall, his face inches from hers. Clever mouse, he hissed. But the cat always wins. Not always, said a voice like winter wind. The vampire's eyes widened. He released Elena and spun, but too slowly. A pale hand emerged from the shadows and closed around his throat, lifting him off his feet with terrifying ease. Dorian stood in the corridor, fully awake despite the pre-dawn hour. But something was wrong. His movements were sluggish, his skin even paler than usual. Veins of black spread across his face like cracks in porcelain. Whatever had woken him was costing him dearly. You attacked my home, Dorian said softly, and his voice carried centuries of controlled fury. Threatened those under my protection. Violated the sanctity of my domain. He threw the vampire down the corridor with such force that the creature's body shattered stone where it impacted. Then Dorian swayed, catching himself against the wall. Elena, he managed. The others, Mrs. Bellamy and Lily, are safe. But there are too many, Dorian. 20 or more. Elena moved to his side, steadying him. You shouldn't be awake. The sun is killing me slowly, yes, he smiled grimly. But I can fight through it for a few hours. Long enough. More vampires poured into the corridor. Dorian pushed Elena behind him and faced them. Something terrible and ancient awakening in his silver eyes. What followed was butchery. Dorian moved through the vampires like a scythe through wheat, his speed blinding, even weakened by daylight. He was older, stronger, and absolutely ruthless. Bodies fell, some fled. The corridor ran red with blood that steamed against cold stone, but for every vampire Dorian destroyed, Elena saw him weaken further. The black veins spread, his movements grew slower, and his breathing, unnecessary for vampires, became labored. Finally, silence. The corridor was empty except for the destroyed. Dorian leaned against the wall, his hand pressed to his chest, where his heart no longer beat. Is it done? Elena whispered. No, Dorian's voice was barely audible. Corvus wasn't with them. This was just the first wave, a test of our defenses. Then we need to leave. Get you somewhere safe until sunset. I can't leave. Dorian's silver eyes found hers, desperate. The blood oath binds me to this manor, to this city. I can't flee, Elena. I can only stand and fight. Elena looked at him, this ancient, powerful creature brought low by sunlight and honor, and made a decision. She cupped his face in her hands, feeling the coldness of his skin. Then you won't stand alone, she said firmly. Tell me what you need. Tell me how to help you survive until sunset. Dorian stared at her, something like wonder breaking through the pain. Why? Why would you risk yourself for me? Because you asked me once why you should bother with humans if we're all fleeting. Elena's voice softened. This is why. Because even a brief life can choose to stand with you when the darkness comes. Because you're not alone anymore, Dorian. Not if I have anything to say about it. For a moment, the ancient vampire looked terribly young, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with daylight weakness. Then he straightened, drawing on reserves Elena couldn't fathom. The cellar. There's a ritual room. If we can reach it, a new voice cut through the corridor, cultured and cold as winter stars. How touching. The ancient Lord of Night, brought low by mortal sentiment, Lord Corvus stood at the corridor's end, flanked by a dozen fresh vampires. He was tall and terrible, with eyes like frozen gold and features carved from marble. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. "Hello, Dorian," he said, smiling. "Shall we finish what we started 3 centuries ago?" Chapter 8. The Price of Protection. Dorian stepped in front of Elena, his body a shield between her and Corvus, despite his weakened state. "You've violated every law, Nathaniel. Attacking a house lord in his own domain during daylight. The Conclave will have your head for this. The Conclave is weak, clinging to outdated accords written by cowards." Corvus moved forward with liquid grace, his golden eyes fixed on Dorian. "The world has changed. Humans multiply like rabbits, filling their cities with electric lights and cameras. Soon there will be nowhere left for us to hide. We must rule them openly, or fade into extinction." "So you'd start a war," Dorian said, his voice strained. "Expose our existence, shatter the peace we've maintained for centuries. For what? Pride? For survival?" Corvus's expression hardened. "You always were sentimental, Dorian. Even when we were young, you hesitated to do what was necessary. That's why I surpassed you." "Why? I'll survive when you're dust." Elena's hand found the silver knife at her belt. Behind Corvus, his vampires spread out, blocking every exit. The air felt thick with tension, like the moment before a storm breaks. "He's baiting you," Elena whispered urgently. "Don't let him, The mortal speaks." Corvus's attention shifted to her, and Elena felt the weight of his gaze like physical pressure. "You're the reason I'm here, you know. When my lieutenant reported that Lord Ashford had taken a human pet, I knew his weakness had finally consumed him." "She's not a pet," Dorian snarled, and something in his voice made the corridor's temperature drop. "She's under my protection. Harm her, and I'll destroy you regardless of the cost, even if it means breaking your precious blood oath. Even if fighting me triggers the very war you claim to want to avoid." Corvus smiled. "That's what I'm counting on, old friend. You're so bound by honor, by duty, that you've forgotten how to truly fight." He gestured, and his vampires surged forward. Dorian met them with desperate fury, his movements still preternaturally fast despite the daylight draining his strength. He tore through the first wave, his hands becoming claws that ripped and shredded. But Elena could see him failing, each movement slower than the last, the black veins spreading further across his skin. She couldn't just watch. She pulled the knife and lunged at the nearest vampire, a young fledgling who'd broken away from the main fight. Her blade found his eye socket, not fatal, but agonizing. He screamed and staggered back. "The cellar," Dorian shouted, destroying another attacker. "Elena, run." But running meant leaving him to face Corvus alone. Elena grabbed a fallen candlestick instead, wielding it like a club. She wasn't trained, wasn't strong, but desperation made her vicious. She struck at knees, at faces, at anything she could reach. A vampire backhanded her casually, and Elena flew across the corridor, crashing into the wall. Pain exploded through her ribs, the same ones Marcus had broken days ago. She tasted blood, her vision, swimming. Through the haze, she saw Corvus close in on Dorian. The ancient vampire moved with terrible grace, each strike precise and devastating. Dorian blocked, countered, but he was fading. The sun was rising higher outside, its distant light poisoning him through the manor's very stones. "You're dying, Dorian," Corvus said almost gently. "You can feel it. The daylight eating you from the inside. Surrender the human, and I'll let you retreat to your day chamber. Live to fight another night." "Never," Dorian gasped, but his legs buckled. He fell to one knee, black blood seeping from wounds that wouldn't heal. Corvus raised his hand for the killing blow. Elena didn't think. She grabbed the silver knife and threw herself between them, the blade angled upward. Corvus's hand impaled itself on the silver, and he roared in pain and fury. "You little!" His fist caught Elena in the chest, stopping her heart for a terrible moment. She collapsed, unable to breathe, unable to think. The world went gray at the edges. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Dorian's face, silver eyes wide with horror and rage as he screamed her name. Elena woke too. Agony, every breath felt like knives in her chest. Her vision swam, refusing to focus. Gradually, she became aware of voices, Dorian's, hoarse with desperation, and another she didn't recognize, dying. "You have to save her, my lord. The ritual requires. I don't care what it requires. Do it." Elena forced her eyes open. She lay on cold stone in a room lit by dozens of candles. Dorian knelt beside her, his face a mask of anguish. The black veins had spread across his entire body now, and he moved with visible pain. Elena, relief flooded his features when he saw her eyes open. Thank gods. Stay with me, please, Lily, Elena managed. Is she safe? Mrs. Bellamy has her locked in the vault. Corvus retreated when he stopped, swallowing hard. You saved my life. You threw yourself between me and a vampire emperor without hesitation. Stupid, Elena whispered. Brave, Dorian's hand found hers, his skin ice cold. Incredibly, impossibly brave. But your injuries are severe. Internal bleeding, crushed ribs. Without intervention, you'll die within the hour. The other voice spoke, an elderly man in robes marked with symbols Elena didn't recognize. My lord, if you're certain about this course, I am. Dorian's jaw set with determination. Prepare the ritual. Elena's mind struggled to process through the pain. What ritual? Dorian looked at her, and in his silver eyes she saw centuries of loneliness, of watching everyone he cared about die, of standing alone against the darkness. I'm going to save your life the only way I can, but it requires your consent. 3 times freely given, or the old laws forbid it. Understanding crashed over her. You want to turn me. I want you to live. His voice cracked. I've watched too many people die, Elena. Too many mortals I cared about slip away while I stood helpless. I won't watch you die too. Not when I have the power to save you. But immortality, Elena coughed, tasting blood. You said it was a curse. That you wouldn't wish it on anyone. I know. Dorian's thumb traced across her knuckles, the gesture heartbreakingly tender. And if you refuse, I'll honor that choice. I'll hold your hand while you pass, and I'll ensure Lily has everything she needs. But I'm begging you, Elena, let me save you. Let me have just one person I care about survive the darkness. Elena looked past him to the robed man, who watched with solemn eyes. What happens if I say yes? You'll die, the man said simply. Dorian will drain you to the edge of death, then feed you his blood. The transformation takes 3 days. You'll burn with fever, feel your mortal body die and rebuild itself. Most don't survive. Those who do wake change stronger, faster, immortal, but no longer entirely human. Elena thought of Lily, who needed a mother. Thought of Dorian, standing alone against Corvus and his army. Thought of all the people in Ashford who would die if no one stood against the darkness. If I become vampire, she asked Dorian, will I lose myself? My humanity? Not if I have anything to say about it. Dorian's voice was fierce. I'll teach you control, ethics, how to maintain your compassion despite the hunger. You'll still be Elena, just a mortal Elena. Stronger Elena. Elena who can stand beside me instead of behind me. And Lily will grow up protected, educated, given every opportunity. When she's old enough, she can choose whether to know what you've become. I'll help you navigate that conversation. His silver eyes pleaded. I can't promise immortality will be easy, but I can promise you won't face it alone. Elena felt her strength fading, her heartbeat irregular and weak. Time was running out. She looked at Dorian, this ancient, powerful creature who'd chosen to save her, to stand with her, who now knelt before her offering eternal life with trembling hands. Ask me, she whispered. Properly. 3 times. Relief and terror warred in Dorian's expression. He took both her hands, his voice formal despite the emotion underlying it. Elena Thorne, do you consent to be turned? To trade your mortal life for immortality, knowing the costs and burdens that come with it? I consent, Elena said clearly. The air grew heavy, charged with something ancient awakening. Elena Thorne, Dorian continued, his voice stronger now. Do you accept my blood freely, of your own will, without coercion or deception? I accept, Elena replied. The candles flickered, responding to powers beyond mortal understanding. Elena Thorne, Dorian said, and his voice broke slightly. Do you choose to walk the night at my side, to become vampire? To join the House of Night as my first fledgling in 60 years? Elena smiled. Despite the pain, despite the fear, despite everything. I choose you, Dorian. Now save my life so I can help you save this city. Dorian's eyes blazed silver bright. He bent over her, his mouth finding the pulse at her throat. Then let it begin, he whispered against her skin. Let death have you, so life can reclaim you. His fangs pierced her throat, and Elena's world dissolved into darkness and transformation. Chapter 9. Between death and dawn, Elena burned. Fire consumed her from the inside out, remaking every cell, every nerve, every fragment of her mortal flesh. She was dimly aware of voices, Dorian's, urgent and worried. Mrs. Bellamy's praying. Lily's crying from somewhere distant. But the pain eclipsed everything, a transformation so complete it felt like being unmade. 3 days, the robed man had said. 3 days of dying and being reborn. Time lost meaning. Sometimes Elena surfaced enough to feel cool cloths on her fevered skin, to taste blood on her lips, Dorian's blood, feeding her transformation. Other times she descended into nightmares, where she chased Lily through endless corridors while her daughter screamed and ran from the monster her mother had become. On the 3rd day, the fever broke. Elena's eyes opened to darkness that wasn't dark at all. She could see everything, every dust mote floating in candlelight, every grain in the wooden ceiling beams, every thread in the tapestries. The detail was overwhelming, beautiful, terrifying. She sat up slowly, her body moving with a grace she'd never possessed. No pain, no weakness. She felt strong, vital, and desperately consuming, hungry. Elena, Dorian's voice came from the corner, and she turned to find him watching her with cautious hope. How do you feel? Different. Her voice sounded the same, but felt different in her throat. Everything is so. She stopped, noticing for the first time that she could hear his heartbeat. Except vampires didn't have heartbeats. What she heard was blood moving through ancient veins, a slow, tidal rhythm that called to something primal in her. Oh, the hunger, Dorian said quietly, understanding. I know. It's overwhelming at first. Elena pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the terrible stillness there. Her heart had stopped. She was dead and alive simultaneously, a walking contradiction of nature. The realization should have terrified her, but instead, she felt oddly calm. Perhaps shock. Perhaps acceptance. Lily, she said urgently. Does she know Mrs. Bellamy told her you were very sick, that you needed special medicine and would sleep for several days? Dorian moved closer, his movements careful, non-threatening. She's been worried, but she's safe. Corvus retreated after what happened. He's regrouping, but we have time. Elena looked down at her hands. They looked the same, but when she flexed her fingers experimentally, she felt power coiled beneath the skin. What am I now? Fledgling vampire, newly turned, still adjusting to the changes. The hunger will be intense for the first few weeks, but I'll teach you control. Dorian settled into a chair across from her, maintaining distance. You're still you, Elena, still the woman who threw herself between me and Corvus. Just more, Elena repeated, testing the word. She stood, and the movement was effortless, fluid. Her injured ribs crushed just days ago felt perfect. How long until I can see Lily? After you've fed properly and gained some control. A starving fledgling near a child, even their own child, is too dangerous. Dorian's tone was gentle but firm. I know it's hard, but Lily's safety comes first. He was right, Elena knew. She could already feel the hunger growing, demanding. Her awareness of Dorian's blood became sharper, more insistent. She could smell it, hear it, sense it like a beacon in the darkness. Teach me, she said, forcing her attention away from the temptation. Show me how to control this. Relief flickered across Dorian's face. First lesson, breathing is optional, but it helps you appear human. Practice. Elena drew breath and was overwhelmed by scents: old wood, candle wax, blood, Dorian's distinctive scent that was somehow both dead and alive. She gasped, then forced herself to breathe slowly, filtering the sensory overload. Good. Next, your strength is approximately 10 times what it was mortal. You'll break things accidentally until you adjust. Everything requires conscious control now: how hard you grip, how fast you move, how much force you use. They spent hours practicing. Elena learned to walk without creating floorboard, to hold objects without crushing them, to move at human speed instead of the blur she was capable of. The lessons were frustrating, humbling, but necessary. Finally, as dawn approached, Elena could feel it somehow. An instinctive awareness of the sun's position. Dorian led her to a private room. You need to feed properly, he said. I've been giving you my blood during the transformation, but fledglings need fresh blood to stabilize. I've arranged for a donor. A young woman entered, her expression nervous but resolute. My lord, she said, curtsying to Dorian. I'm honored to serve. Elena stared at her, at the pulse beating visibly in her throat, and felt the hunger surge like a tidal wave. I can't. What if I hurt her? You won't. Dorian's hand found Elena's shoulder, steadying. I'll guide you. The old laws require consent and compensation. She's volunteered and will be paid well. You take only what's offered, and you stop when I tell you. the woman Anna. She introduced herself, sat in a chair and tilted her head, exposing her throat. Elena could hear her elevated heartbeat, smell the fear beneath her brave facade. I don't know how, Elena whispered. Instinct will guide you, Dorian said softly. But I'll be here. Trust yourself. Trust me. Elena approached slowly, her new senses cataloging everything: the warmth of Anna's skin, the rhythm of her pulse, the scent of blood just beneath the surface. When she opened her mouth, fangs descended, sharp and ready. She bit carefully, and the first taste of blood exploded across her tongue. It was nothing like she'd imagined, not copper or salt, but something richer, complex, carrying echoes of Anna's emotions and experiences. Life itself distilled. The hunger roared, demanding more. But Dorian's hand tightened on her shoulder. Easy, slow, drink carefully, not greedily. Elena forced herself to sip rather than gulp, to take only what was needed. After what felt like both seconds and hours, Dorian said, enough. Stop now. It took everything Elena had to pull away, to seal the puncture wounds with her tongue, as instinct demanded. Anna swayed slightly, but smiled. Thank you, miss. That wasn't so bad. Dorian pressed coins into Anna's hand far more than seemed necessary and dismissed her gently. When they were alone, he turned to Elena. Well done. Most fledglings can't stop on their first feeding. They have to be physically restrained. Elena wiped her mouth, still tasting blood, still feeling the hunger beneath the surface, but no longer overwhelming. How long until it gets easier? Years, Dorian admitted. Decades for some. But you showed remarkable control just now. You have a strong will, Elena. That will serve you well. She looked at him, her sire, her teacher, the vampire who'd chosen to save her and damn her in the same breath. I need to see Lily. Soon. Even if I can't hold her yet. I need to see that she's real. That she's safe. Dorian nodded. Tomorrow night, after you've rested through the day and fed again, you can watch her from a distance. And when you're ready, truly ready, I'll help you explain everything to her. Thank you. Elena's voice broke slightly. For saving me. For believing I could handle this. You saved me first, Dorian replied, his silver eyes intense. In that corridor, when you threw yourself between me and Corvus, you gave me something I haven't had in 3 centuries, someone willing to stand with me instead of behind me. Someone who chose to fight beside me despite knowing what I am. He stepped closer, his hand cupping her cheek with infinite gentleness. I've been alone so long, Elena. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have a partner, an equal. Someone who sees the monster and stays anyway. Elena leaned into his touch, feeling the coolness of his skin against hers, both of them dead, both of them alive, both of them impossibly changed. We're going to destroy Corvus. Yes, Dorian agreed. Together. But first, you need to learn to be vampire, to master your new nature, to become the weapon that will help me save this city. He smiled, and for the first time, Elena saw hope in his ancient eyes. Welcome to the House of Night, Elena Thorne. Welcome to immortality. Welcome to the war that will define both our eternities. As dawnlight began to creep beneath the door, and exhaustion pulled at her, Elena felt something settle in her chest, not her heartbeat, which was gone forever, but something deeper, purpose, partnership, the beginning of something that transcended mortality. She would learn. She would master this. And she would stand beside Dorian when the final battle came. And no longer the victim. No longer the mortal in need of saving. Now the hunter. Now the warrior. Now immortal. Chapter 10. The Choice. 23 days after her transformation, Elena crouched on the rooftop across from the copper rose and felt truly alive for the first time in her new existence. Below, Corvus's vampires moved through the gambling house with arrogant certainty, unaware they were being hunted. Elena could track each one through the walls, her senses now so acute she could distinguish individual heartbeats, could smell the difference between human and vampire blood, could hear conversations happening 3 buildings away. Ready? Dorian's voice was soft beside her. He'd taught her everything he knew in those 3 weeks: how to fight, how to hunt, how to move through the city like a shadow, how to be vampire without losing herself. Ready, Elena confirmed. In her hand, she held detailed maps of Hale's operation, ledgers she'd stolen from his office showing payments to Corvus, evidence of unauthorized turnings. Everything they needed to prove Corvus had violated the Accords, everything they needed to end this war. Remember the plan, Dorian said. We extract the evidence, free any humans being held, and retreat. No direct confrontation with Corvus until the conclave arrives. Elena nodded. but her attention was caught by movement in the gambling house. A woman was being dragged toward the back rooms, young, terrified, clearly not consenting. The same scenario Elena had witnessed weeks ago as a mortal. This time, she could do something about it. There's someone inside who needs help, she said quietly. Dorian followed her gaze and tensed. Elena, if we deviate from the plan, then we deviate. She looked at him, silver meeting silver. You taught me that every life matters. That choosing who to save makes us no better than Corvus. That woman is someone's daughter, maybe someone's mother. We don't leave her. For a moment, Dorian simply stared at her. Then he smiled, fierce and proud. You're going to be trouble for eternity, aren't you? You knew that when you turned me. They descended to street level like falling shadows, moving through the pre-midnight crowds with practiced ease. Elena had learned to blend, to move among humans without triggering their prey instincts. She'd learned to see the world as Dorian saw it, patterns and threats, opportunities and dangers. The endless chess game of supernatural politics. They entered through a service entrance, bypassing guards with supernatural speed. Inside, the copper rose, pulsed with desperate energy, gamblers losing money they didn't have, dealers running crooked games, and underneath it all, the copper scent of blood, too much blood. The basement, Elena whispered, her senses tracking the source. There are people down there, injured, dying. They found the stairs and descended into darkness. That was no barrier to vampire eyes. What they discovered made Elena's new heart clench with rage. Cages, dozens of them, filled with humans in various states of injury and terror. Some bore bite marks that hadn't healed properly. Others showed signs of failed turnings, blackened veins, fever-bright eyes, the slow death of a body rejecting vampire blood. Dear gods, Dorian breathed. He's been experimenting, trying to perfect a faster turning process. A figure emerged from the shadows, the golden-eyed vampire, Corvus's lieutenant, Lord Ashford, and his pet fledgling. How delightful. He wasn't alone. 6 vampires materialized from the darkness, surrounding them. But Elena had learned to count opponents, to calculate odds, to see battles before they happened. Free them, she said to Dorian. I'll handle this. Elena, I'm not mortal anymore. I'm not weak. I'm vampire, and I'm angry. She bared her fangs, feeling power coil in her limbs. Trust me. Dorian hesitated only a moment, then moved toward the cages. The golden-eyed vampire lunged to stop him, but Elena intercepted, her new strength meeting his with a shock that sent them both staggering. You're newly turned, he snarled. You can't possibly. Elena drove her fist into his throat, collapsing his windpipe. Vampires didn't need to breathe, but the injury still hurt, still disoriented. She followed with a knee to his chest, feeling ribs crack. The other vampires rushed her. Elena moved like water, like Dorian had taught her, using their numbers against them. She wasn't stronger than all of them, but she was smarter, faster, more desperate. She fought with a mother's fury, with a survivor's cunning, with everything she'd learned in her brief, brilliant mortality. Behind her, she heard cage doors opening, humans fleeing up the stairs, heard Dorian shouting instructions, directing them to safety, heard the golden-eyed vampire screaming orders that no one followed because Elena had taken his authority with his dignity. Then new footsteps echoed through the basement, and the temperature dropped. Lord Corvus descended the stairs like a king surveying his domain. His golden eyes found Elena, took in the carnage, the freed prisoners, the ruined operation. Impressive. The mortal pet has grown claws. Dorian moved to Elena's side, his stance protective. It's over, Nathaniel. We have the evidence. The conclave is already en route. They'll see what you've done, the unauthorized turnings, the human experiments, the broken accords. Will they? Corvus smiled coldly. Or will they see a desperate lord protecting his territory by any means necessary? I have witnesses who will swear you attacked me first, that you turned this human without proper protocols, that you've been feeding without consent. Lies. Elena spat. Lies backed by a dozen vampires' testimony versus the word of a newly made fledgling and a lord known for sentiment. Corvus spread his hands. Who do you think the conclave will believe? Dorian's expression darkened. You'd perjure yourself before the assembled houses? I'd do whatever necessary to restore the natural order. Humans are cattle, Dorian. Food. The sooner you accept that, the easier eternity becomes. No, Elena stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. Humans are people. They matter. And I'll spend eternity proving it if I have to. Corvus laughed. Such fire. Tell me, fledgling, Do you truly understand what you've become? You're a predator now. That woman you saved will only live another 40 years, while you endure forever. You'll watch her die, and her children, and theirs. Eventually, you'll realize that caring about mortals is pointless. They're Mayflea's beautiful and brief and utterly insignificant. You're wrong, Dorian said quietly. Their brevity makes them precious. Their choices matter more because they have so little time to make them. Elena understood that as a mortal, and she understands it now as vampire. That's why she'll be a better immortal than you ever were. Corvus's smile faded. Then you've both chosen your side. How unfortunate. He moved, faster than anything Elena had seen, his hand driving toward Dorian's heart. But Elena was already moving too, her body acting on instinct and training and desperate love. She caught Corvus's wrist, felt bones grind under her grip. Touch him, she snarled, and I'll tear you apart piece by piece. For a moment, Corvus simply stared at her, this fledgling who should have been no threat, who'd been mortal just weeks ago. Then he wrenched his hand free and stepped back. The conclave arrives tomorrow night, he said coldly. We'll let them decide who's violated the accords. But know this, Lord Ashford, I will destroy everything you've built. Your city, your house, your pathetic human-loving philosophy. And I'll start with her. He vanished in a blur of motion, his remaining vampires fleeing with him. Silence filled the basement, broken only by Dorian's unnecessary breathing. That was reckless, he said finally. That was necessary, Elena countered. He was going to kill you, and you were willing to die to stop him. Dorian turned to her, his silver eyes luminous in the darkness. Do you understand what you've done? You've made yourself his primary target. He'll come for you specifically now. Good. Elena met his gaze steadily. Let him come. I'm not afraid anymore. Dorian's hand found hers, their cool fingers intertwining. I'm afraid for you. Afraid of losing you after just finding you. Then don't lose me. Elena squeezed his hand. Stand with me. Fight with me. Trust that I'm strong enough to face whatever comes. Above them, sirens wailed. The freed prisoners had reached the authorities. Soon the building would be swarming with humans, with questions, with complications. We need to leave, Dorian said. Before we're exposed, Elena finished. I know. But Dorian, she pulled him close, her forehead resting against his. When this is over, when Corvus is defeated and the city is safe, I need to tell Lily the truth. About what I am, what we are. She's 6 years old, Dorian said gently. Are you certain she's ready for that knowledge? No, but I'm ready to give her the choice to know her mother fully, or to walk away if she can't accept what I've become. Elena's voice broke slightly. I won't lie to her forever. She deserves the truth, even if it costs me everything. Dorian pulled back to look at her, something profound and tender in his ancient eyes. You're the bravest person I've ever known, mortal or immortal. And whatever Lily chooses, whatever the conclave decides, whatever Corvus threatens, I will stand beside you. For eternity, if you'll have me. Elena felt tears she could no longer cry prick at her eyes. For eternity, she promised. They fled into the night together. Two vampires bound by choice and blood, and something deeper than either. And in the distance, dawn approached, bringing with it the conclave, judgment, and the final confrontation that would determine the fate of Ashford and everyone in it. Chapter 11. The reckoning. Conclave arrived with the sunset, their carriages rolling through Ashford's gates like a funeral procession. Elena watched from the manor's highest window as vampire lords and ladies emerged, being so ancient they made Dorian look young. Their power palpable even from a distance. 7 houses, Dorian said quietly beside her, naming them as they arrived. Meridian, Eclipse, Thorn, Sanctum, Raven, Crimson, and Winter. The oldest bloodlines in existence. They haven't gathered like this into centuries. Elena could feel their age in the air itself, a pressure that made her newly turned instincts scream danger. Will they be fair? They'll be political. Dorian's jaw tightened. Corvus is from House Raven, one of the most influential families. They'll want to protect their own. But the evidence we gathered is damning. If we present it correctly, they'll have no choice but to rule against him. And if they don't? Dorian didn't answer, which was answer enough. They descended to the great hall, where Mrs. Bellamy had prepared the space for the tribunal. Centuries-old tapestries hung from the walls, depicting vampire history in thread and blood. 7 thrones had been arranged in a semicircle, and already the house lords were taking their seats. Beautiful, terrible creatures who'd seen empires rise and fall. Lady Meridian spoke first. her voice carrying the weight of millennia. Lord Ashford, you've called for a blood trial, invoking the ancient accords. State your accusation. Dorian stepped forward, every inch the House Lord. Elena remained at his side, a statement in itself. Newly turned fledglings didn't typically attend conclave proceedings, but Dorian had insisted she be present. Lord Nathaniel Corvus has violated the accords, Dorian began, his voice steady. He has turned humans without proper consent protocols, experimented on mortals without authorization, and established a criminal empire that threatens to expose our existence to human authorities, he gestured. And servants brought forth the evidence ledgers, photographs, testimony from freed prisoners. The conclave examined everything with ancient, calculating eyes. Lord Raven Corvus's blood relative leaned forward. These are serious accusations. Do you have vampire witnesses to support these claims? I have evidence, Dorian countered. Physical proof of. We require vampire testimony, Lady Eclipse interrupted coldly. The accords are clear. Mortal evidence can be fabricated. Only another vampire's sworn word carries weight in these proceedings. Elena felt ice form in her stomach. This was the trap Corvus had warned them about. Without vampire witnesses willing to testify against him, the evidence meant nothing. I have a witness, a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. The golden-eyed vampire Corvus's lieutenant limped into the hall, his face showing signs of recent violence. I, Marcus of House Raven, third-generation Surd, do hereby offer testimony against Lord Corvus. Shocked silence filled the hall. Lord Raven's expression darkened. Marcus? You would betray your own house? I would honor the accords my house has forgotten, Marcus replied, his voice shaking but determined. Lord Corvus has committed atrocities. I've witnessed unauthorized turnings, human experiments, violations of every law we hold sacred. I can no longer remain silent. He crossed to stand beside Dorian and Elena, and she saw clearly the bruises marking his face. Corvus had beaten him for his betrayal, but he'd come anyway. This changes nothing, Lord Raven snarled. One disgraced fledgling's word against a House Lord's two witnesses. Another voice called. A female vampire entered, young, beautiful, marked with scars that even vampire healing hadn't erased. I am Sarah of No House, turned without consent by Corvus's people, forced to serve his operation. I testify to his crimes. Then another vampire stepped forward, and another, and another. By the time the procession ended, 12 vampires stood beside Dorian, former members of Corvus's operation, witnesses to his violations, ready to speak truth despite the cost. Elena felt something break open in her chest. Hope. Fierce and bright, Lady Meridian's expression shifted to something like respect. It seems you have your witnesses, Lord Ashford. Let the testimony begin. What followed was hours of painful truth. Each witness detailed Corvus's crimes, the humans turned against their will, the experiments that left dozens dead, the systematic violation of every accord. Marcus spoke of orders to feed without consent, to create fledglings as weapons, to prepare for war against the very conclave sitting in judgment. Through it all, Elena noticed Corvus's absence. He'd been summoned but hadn't appeared, a violation of conclave protocol that spoke volumes. Where is the accused? Lady Eclipse demanded finally. Why does Lord Corvus not defend himself? The answer came in the form of screams from outside. Elena's vampire hearing caught it first. Fighting in the city, buildings burning, humans fleeing in terror. She ran to the window and felt her blood freeze. Corvus hadn't come to the trial because he'd decided to reject the accords entirely. His army of fledglings was attacking Ashford openly, feeding without restraint, turning humans in the streets. It was chaos, carnage, the very exposure the accords existed to prevent. He's forcing your hand, Elena said, understanding flooding through her. If you rule against him now, you look like you're bowing to his intimidation. If you don't, you allow his violations to stand. Either way, he wins, unless we stop him, Dorian said quietly. He turned to the conclave. I invoke my right as defender of this territory to lead an immediate response. Grant me sanction, and I'll end this tonight. Lady Meridian stood, her ancient face carved from ice and fury. The conclave grants sanction. Stop, Lord Corvus, by any means necessary. We will not allow our existence to be exposed by one lord's ambition. The other House Lords rose, their combined power making the air vibrate. We stand with you, Lord Ashford. House Corvus has shamed us all. End this. Dorian bowed, then turned to Elena. This is it. The final battle. Are you ready? Elena thought of Lily, safe in the manor's vault with Mrs. Bellamy. Thought of all the humans dying in Ashford streets because one ancient vampire refused to accept that the world had changed. Thought of the choice she'd made to stand with Dorian, to become vampire, to fight for a future where both species could coexist. I'm ready, she said. Let's end this. They gathered their allies, the 12 vampire witnesses, the House Lord's personal guards, every vampire in Ashford loyal to the Accords. An army of immortals united for perhaps the first time in centuries. As they prepared to march into the burning city, Marcus approached Elena. Thank you, he said quietly, for showing me that standing with the right side matters more than loyalty to those who've lost their way. Thank you for being brave enough to testify, Elena replied. That took more courage than fighting ever will. Dorian found her in the chaos, his hand finding hers one last time before battle. Whatever happens tonight, don't, Elena interrupted. Don't say goodbye. Say, I'll see you when this is over. He smiled, fierce and bright, and full of something that looked like love. I'll see you when this is over, Elena Thorne. And then we'll build something better from these ashes, together, Elena promised. Together, he agreed. They stepped out into the burning night, an army at their backs, an eternity stretching before them. Somewhere in the city, Corvus waited, ancient, powerful, and desperate enough to destroy everything rather than accept defeat. But Elena was done being afraid, done being the victim, done letting monsters dictate the terms. Tonight, the hunters became the hunted. Tonight, Ashford would learn what happened when you threatened a fledgling vampire who'd given up mortality itself to protect those she loved. Tonight, the war ended one way or another. The battle for Ashford's soul had begun. Chapter 12. The final stand. The streets of Ashford burned with chaos unlike anything the city had seen in 3 centuries. Elena moved through the carnage like a shadow of vengeance, her vampire senses tracking Corvus's fledglings as they terrorized the neighborhoods she'd once walked as mortal. She could hear screaming from 3 blocks away, smell blood on the wind, feel the tremor of footsteps as humans fled and vampires hunted. East Quarter. 4 fledglings feeding openly. She called to Dorian, who fought beside her with centuries of practiced efficiency. The bakery district. Marcus, take your squad, Dorian ordered. The golden-eyed vampire nodded and vanished with 6 fighters. Moving to intercept, they divided their forces strategically, House Lords and their elite guards protecting critical areas, while Dorian's loyalists moved through the streets in coordinated strikes. Elena had proven herself a tactical asset, her mortal knowledge of Ashford's layout combined with her new vampire abilities, making her invaluable. But for every fledgling they stopped, 2 more seemed to appear. Corvus had been building this army for months, turning indiscriminately, creating a force of reckless young vampires with no training and no conscience. He's not here, Elena said, frustration edging her voice as they cleared another street. Corvus is letting his fledglings do the damage while he stays hidden. He's waiting, Dorian replied grimly, for us to exhaust ourselves, or for the Conclave to withdraw their support. He knows I'm bound to this city. I can't leave to hunt him elsewhere. A scream cut through the night, familiar, high-pitched, terrified. Elena's world stopped. She knew that voice, had soothed that voice through nightmares, had heard it laugh and cry and call for her. Lily. She was running before conscious thought caught up, Dorian's shout of warning lost behind her. Her daughter's scream came from the direction of the manor. Impossible, Mrs. Bellamy had sworn the vault was impenetrable, that Lily would be safe. Elena burst through the manor gates to find them torn from their hinges. The courtyard was littered with bodies, servants, guards, all dead or dying. And in the center stood Corvus, holding Lily against his chest with one pale hand. Mrs. Bellamy lay unconscious at his feet. There she is, Corvus said pleasantly. The famous Elena, the mortal who became vampire for love. Elena forced herself to stop to think, despite the primal terror screaming through her. Lily was crying, reaching for her mother with small hands, but Corvus's grip kept her immobilized. Let her go, Elena said, her voice deadly calm. She's a child. She has nothing to do with this. On the contrary, she has everything to do with this. Corvus smiled, cold and terrible. You're Dorian's weakness now, his fledgling, his companion, his hope for a different kind of immortality. And she's yours. Take her from me, and I lose my leverage. Keep her safe, and you'll do anything I ask. Dorian arrived then, moving to stand beside Elena. His face was a mask of controlled fury. Nathaniel, This violates every— I'm done with the accords, Corvus interrupted. Done pretending humans matter. Done hiding in shadows while cattle multiply and build their cameras and lights. His fingers tightened on Lily, making her whimper. The old ways are returning. I'm just accelerating the inevitable. Elena felt something crack inside her, the last restraint, the final hesitation. She'd become vampire to protect the people she loved. She'd learned to hunt, to fight, to be monster when necessary. And now this ancient creature thought he could use her daughter as a bargaining chip. You want the old ways? Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. Let me show you how mortals fought before we learned to fear the dark. She moved with every ounce of speed her fledgling body possessed, not toward Corvus, but toward Mrs. Bellamy's fallen form. The housekeeper's hand still clutched something, a silver cross. Blessed and burning with holy energy that even vampires respected, Elena grabbed it despite the pain searing her palm, spun, and threw it with precision born of desperate love. The cross struck Corvus's hand, the one holding Lily. He screamed and released her reflexively. Lily fell, and Dorian was already there, catching the child and rolling away with vampire speed. Elena didn't stop. She closed the distance to Corvus in a heartbeat, her hands finding his throat. Silver burned them both where the cross had struck, but she didn't care. Pain was temporary. Lily's safety was everything. You should have studied mortals better, she snarled, driving Corvus backward with savage strength. We're not just cattle. We're survivors. We're fighters. And when you threaten our children, we become something far more dangerous than vampires. Corvus recovered, his ancient power surging. He backhanded Elena hard enough to send her flying across the courtyard. She crashed into the fountain, the same fountain where Marcus had beaten her weeks ago, and felt stone crack beneath the impact. But she rose. Always she rose. Dorian appeared at her side, fury incarnate. End this now, Nathaniel. The conclave has ruled. Your house has abandoned you. You have nothing left but pride. I have power, Corvus spat. More than you, more than the conclave, more than any of your pathetic human lovers, he gestured. And his remaining fledglings poured through the gates to dozens strong, all willing to die for their sire. The conclave lords arrived then, their guards forming ranks. Lady Meridian's voice rang across the courtyard with centuries of authority. Lord Corvus, you are hereby stripped of title, house, and protection. The conclave declares you rogue. Surrender or be destroyed. Corvus laughed high and wild and utterly mad. Destroy me? I am eternal. I remember Rome's fall. Watched empires crumble. You think your little laws can? Dorian moved faster than Elena had ever seen him move. One moment he stood beside her. The next, his hand closed around Corvus's throat, lifting the ancient vampire off his feet. You're not eternal, Dorian said quietly. You're just old. And you've forgotten the most important lesson: immortality means nothing without something worth living for. Corvus struggled, clawing at Dorian's grip. You don't have the strength to kill me. You're too weak too. He's not alone, Elena said, moving to stand with her sire. Her hand joined Dorian's, their combined strength overwhelming even Corvus's ancient power. One by one, the vampire witnesses joined them. Marcus, Sarah, all 12 who'd testified, plus dozens more of Dorian's loyalists adding their hands to the effort. A pyramid of vampire strength, united against the tyrant. This is for every human you tortured, Elena whispered. For every life you stole. For every law you broke, thinking yourself above justice. Corvus's eyes widened with genuine fear for the first time in centuries. Wait, they didn't wait. Together, united, they pulled. Corvus's head separated from his body with a sound like breaking marble. His body began to crumble immediately, 3,000 years of existence catching up in seconds. By the time he hit the ground, there was nothing left but dust and expensive clothes. Silence filled the courtyard. Then Lady Meridian spoke. Let it be known the accords stand. The houses remain united. And Lord Ashford's defense of mortal life is hereby validated by conclave law. The other house lords nodded, accepting the judgment. Corvus's fledglings, suddenly masterless and disoriented, surrendered or fled. The battle was over. Elena didn't care about politics or validation. She ran to where Dorian knelt beside Lily, gently checking her for injuries. The little girl was crying, but unharmed, reaching for her mother with desperate hands. Mama? Mama, you're different. You smell different. Your eyes are— I know, sweetheart. Elena gathered her daughter close, careful of her new strength. I know I'm different. I have so much to tell you. But first her voice broke. First, I just need you to know that I love you. More than anything. That will never change, no matter what I've become. Lily pulled back to look at her mother's face, her child's wisdom, seeing past fear to truth. Are you a monster now? Elena glanced at Dorian, who watched with ancient eyes full of gentle understanding. She thought about what she'd become: predator, immortal, creature of night, but also protector, fighter, someone who'd chosen to stand against the darkness. I don't know, Elena admitted honestly. Maybe, but if I am, I'm a monster who loves you, who will always protect you, who will be here for you for as long as you need me. Lily considered this with 6-year-old seriousness. Then she wrapped her small arms around Elena's neck and whispered, then you're my monster. And that's okay. Elena held her daughter close as dawn approached, feeling Dorian's hand settle gently on her shoulder. Around them, the conclave began to depart, their business concluded. The city would heal. Laws would be enforced. A new era had begun, one where vampires and humans might finally learn to coexist as equals rather than predator and prey. But for Elena, in this moment, the only thing that mattered was the warm weight of her daughter in her arms and the cool presence of her sire at her side. She had fought. She had survived. She had chosen immortality, and immortality had chosen her back. The story wasn't over, it was just beginning.